decided to continue my studies after completing my undergraduate degree was practical, if nothing else. One of the skills I wanted to pick up as part of my master's is skills in management. And it's to that extent that I decided to continue my studies, because there's nothing like a pandemic to expand my skills and to equip myself to be as high up the food chain employment-wise as possible.
Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. The thing is, though, the way you and I differ is you've sort of taken the pandemic and been like, I'm gonna use this time, whereas my very cynical brain doesn't want to pay out quite a lot of money for what I consider to be an online streaming service. And obviously it hasn't been like that throughout the pandemic. I actually remember you talking about your experience at uni, like in like the sort of September, October time, and I was surprised that you were doing stuff face to face, because in my head the pandemic hasn't really, shouldn't have changed. The rules shouldn't have been relaxed over the summer, as I've mentioned. So hearing that Bolton were doing stuff, face to face, I was like, oh, isn't that a bit dangerous? But of course it was allowed, and the cases were lower at the time, and obviously it meant you were getting far more out of your degree than having it entirely online, because I think a lot of what you do is quite practical. But I do admire you for taking the time and using it practically. So yeah, well done with that. Let's talk about some other stories that people have submitted in. So if you missed it, I put out some calls for some COVID university related stories to talk about how teaching's kind of changed. And my friend has told me that apparently a lecturer at her uni didn't let them email in any questions about the content because it's all online. Which I think is a little bit counterproductive, because universities need to allow for more question answer asking, especially in this current time, because learning is that much more difficult for a lot of people. Which actually brings me on to another related issue. No detriment or safety net policies, whereby your grades are sort of saved by the university, and the reason that this is in place is because of the pandemic. Did you have any kind of policy like that in place last year, Simon, or?
Kind of. There was a piece of work that I had to redo because of me ambitiously yet rubbishly misunderstanding the instruction, but it was fine. They put me straight on what I needed to do, and obviously I must have done enough because I came out with a 2-1 overall in the end. Yeah, they contacted me after I submitted, a couple of weeks after I submitted my dissertation, ironically enough, and they told me what had happened and advised me on what I needed to do, because they saw that I attended the lectures, whether in person pre-pandemic, that's hard to say, or online after the pandemic started. So
that's slightly different than for Cardiff. For Cardiff, the no detriment policy was basically all of your grades up until the 16th of March were your B mark, as they called it, and then your grades, including the end of the year, were your A mark, and then they would work out which grade was higher, and that would be your final grade. And that was for final years. I actually don't know what it was for second years. I think for second years or first years, it was slightly different. There's actually a possibility they didn't have a safety net policy for second years, but then there was outcry, so they added in one that worked kind of similarly to the one for final years, but not exactly the same. And I'm so grateful for the safety net policy. Not that it actually would have changed my grades. I would have got a 2-1 either way, but I think it was sort of helpful to have that, especially because I was going through my own stuff at the time. For those who don't know, I got diagnosed with a chronic illness around the same time the pandemic started. So having that extra safety net there while all this was going on was incredibly helpful for me. And I was very, very grateful for that. Interestingly enough, though, it took Cardiff University a long time to bring in a safety net policy for this year, even though the pandemic has affected a far longer time period. I don't know if you're aware of this, Simon, but originally there was no safety net policy at Cardiff for this year, and there was a video leaked of a Cardiff University lecturer calling students idiots for sharing a petition in lectures to try and change that.
Yeah, it's a complete contrast to Bolton, a complete and utter contrast, because Bolton have, even from the start, they've taken the pandemic very seriously, even when it came to tentatively planning students coming in. Because those that wanted to come into lectures, first of all, they had to fill in an online form to say that they wanted to come in. Then they had to go through a temperature scanner at the entrance to each building of the university, scan the ID card to show that they're in, and once they're in the classroom, taking for granted the face mask provision and sanitising every surface, etc. Scanning a QR code on each desk for purpose of track and trace, so that they knew who was sitting where on any given day.
I mean, to be fair, I think that a lot of universities would have done that anyway, just because that was the policy for the entire country. The impression I actually get is that Russell Group universities like Cardiff Uni and all the red brick ones, they haven't actually been the best when it comes to COVID. Their student support has not been top notch, to be fair, whereas non-Russell groups like Bolton, because I suppose because they have that smaller student population, have been better at giving students the support they need to get through this difficult time. And I think that's just quite interesting that it's sort of picking holes in the big universities and pointing out that sometimes having a smaller student population is better. So I was wondering what you think about that, and how you feel Bolton has been with student support during the pandemic, particularly.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, it's reflected off a promotional video I helped the university make in 2019. There was basically a video advertising the uni to audiences outside of Greater Manchester and Lancashire. One particular line from the script I was given went something along the lines of, "We're proud to know you by your name, not your student number," which I think is indicative, that's hard to say, for how small Bolton is as a university and how seriously they take interacting with the students there.
Sorry about the mouth noises, I just had some more tea.
I've just finished mine.
Yeah, you just finished? Yeah, we finished at the same time pretty much, didn't we? Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from. It's a lot of people who kind of dissed Cardiff Met in the past, which is the non-Russell Group university in Cardiff. Well, actually, there's three. There's USW as well, but a lot of people who dissed Cardiff Met as well have kind of sort of changed their tune recently to be like, the student support is far better there than at Cardiff Uni. That's the kind of thing I've been reading on Overheard, which is the student sharing group on Facebook where they can share stories, but also promote student activities, things like that. Do you feel more relaxed when you're learning from home, Simon? As in, do you wear pajamas when you're doing lectures, or do you get dressed like you're actually going out for the day or whatever?
In terms of preparing for the online lectures, call me a good boy or whatever. I like to think that I prepare myself as if I was actually going in, even though I know I'm not. So I set my alarm, if it was a 9 a.m. lecture, for example, I set it for 7:30, which is a average sort of time that I set it for 9 a.m. lecture. Freshen myself up, have breakfast, have a tea if necessary, if I need to wake myself up, and find the Zoom link in good time.
That is far more organised than me. I never did that when I was studying. I always... Okay, not always. Sometimes I was quite organised, but by the time I sort of moved home to do my lectures, I kind of did quite a few of them in bed, including, like, the seminars. I'd just be, like, in bed on my phone, like, hi, I'm here tuning in, I'm productive. I think that a lot of students have kind of done the same as me, to be honest. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens when things go back to normal. Will it be sort of a
previous normal or near as anyway?
Would it be a tough culture shift for people to have to actually get up and get dressed? So yeah, that's
one other
something.
prerequisite. That was a tough word to say again, but one other prerequisite I do when attending online lectures, I always have the camera on so they can actually see that I'm paying attention rather than just having them blindly assume I'm on there by being logged in, but the camera not on.
See, I hated having the camera on. I mean, it's the same thing as, like, physically sitting in a lecture, if you feel me. Like, I always sat at the back. I don't want to be noticed. So yeah, camera off for me. And I was never a fan.
So what, are you saying you're like, nothing to see here?
Right, I'm just like, there's a chance I could be hungover or something like that. Like, I don't want to be seen like
it's
that.
It's all coming out now.
Like that. I know. This is how I spent my life as a student. I mean, it's how a lot of people do as well, to be fair. But yeah. Anyway, I think that kind of brings us to the end. Kind of glad we ended on a light-hearted note, because I feel like a lot of the stuff we discussed was kind of heavy. But yeah, so it's
I just hope it's been eye-opening.
Yeah, I think
because a lot of people probably think that people, quote, don't know what's going on, but through this, you're advertising that nobody is alone. There are others in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly, and also I think that there is this kind of idea that students are the problem. You know, like, students are the ones mixing with each other and things like that, and that's not necessarily true of every student. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, that there are I think the vast majority of students in the country are following the rules and are staying safe, and credit to them, their education has been completely fucked over. So yeah, well done, students. But yeah, anyway, thank you, Simon.
Talking of which, one last thing. For anyone wanting to follow in my footsteps and do a master's also, be warned, the funds provided through the loan are not nearly enough to cover all the basic costs. It's best to have saved some money beforehand.
We are a full-on advertisement for doing higher education here, people. The money is tight, and it might be like Netflix. There you go. Time for tea and talk. Thank you, Simon, for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion that we had. I just want to know from anybody else if there's anything you want me to cover in future episodes. I do like talking about the more controversial aspects of the world right now. I think it's really important to discuss those things. So let me know what you think, and thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Well, hear you next time. Okay, goodbye!
It's Wednesday at 11, so you know what that means. It's time for tea and talk.
Oh, what's that?
Bitch, please.